I still remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong. My wife, Laura, called me out of the blue one evening and said, "Hey, I'll be working late tonight." Just 30 minutes earlier, I told her I had a surprise waiting at home. Funny timing, right? Back then, I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was being paranoid. But that night became the turning point of my life. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy stories about real life, betrayal, and the unexpected turns people never see coming, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let me tell you how everything began. The night my marriage turned into a mystery I didn't know I was already solving. It was early autumn, one of those quiet evenings when the air feels heavy with the smell of rain. I left work earlier than usual, hoping to do something special for Laura's birthday coming up next week. She'd been distant lately, distracted, her laughter thinner somehow. I told myself she was just tired from work. I wanted to remind her of us, the couple who used to stay up until midnight watching old movies and talking about everything. So, I stopped by a small jewelry store near downtown. The woman behind the counter smiled and said, "Buying something for someone special?" I nodded and picked out a delicate gold bracelet, simple but elegant, something I thought she'd love. I planned a quiet dinner, just the two of us, candles, wine, her favorite pasta. As I drove home, I imagined her face lighting up like it used to. When I got home, I texted her, "Got something for you tonight. Can't wait for you to see it." No reply. 15 minutes later, she called, her tone detached. "I'll be working late, don't wait up." My smile froze. "Late?" I asked. "Yeah," she said flatly. "A few projects came up. Go ahead and eat without me." She hung up before I could answer. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at her contact photo, trying to convince myself I was overthinking. But something in her voice wasn't right. Too rehearsed, too polished. I tried to distract myself. I cooked dinner anyway, poured a glass of wine, and waited. Hours passed. Her location on the phone said she was near a business hotel on the other side of town. I knew that place. It wasn't near her office. I told myself she could be meeting clients, but a cold weight pressed against my chest. At midnight, I sent her another text. "Everything okay?" No answer. I sat there at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me. The candle had burned down to a stub. The wine had gone warm. I thought of all those little gestures that used to mean something. A quick kiss before work, her hand brushing mine on the couch, the small messages she'd leave on sticky notes by my coffee mug. Lately, all that had faded, replaced by excuses and silence. I turned off the lights, but sleep never came. Around 2 a.m., I got up and checked my phone again. No new messages. My gut whispered what my heart refused to believe. I grabbed my car keys. I wasn't planning a fight or a scene. I just needed the truth. I drove through the quiet streets, headlights cutting through the fog. The hotel came into view, bright, polished, full of late-night executives and empty promises. I parked, stepped out, and walked into the lobby like I belonged there. The receptionist didn't even look up as I entered the elevator. My heart pounded, but my steps stayed calm. The doors opened on the 5th floor. Laughter drifted down the hallway, hers. I froze. I'd know that sound anywhere. That soft, unguarded laugh that used to belong to me. I followed the sound until I saw her. She stood outside a hotel room with her boss, a man I'd met at her company dinner once. He handed her a keycard, and she smiled. That same smile I hadn't seen in months. The bracelet box in my pocket suddenly felt heavier than stone. I didn't rush forward. I didn't shout. I just stood there, watching, memorizing every second. When she opened the door, I stepped out of the shadow and said quietly, "You forgot your late-night report, Laura." She froze, color draining from her face. Her boss stammered something, but I didn't hear it. I held up the box. "I thought I'd bring you your surprise. Looks like you've already got one of your own." The hallway fell silent. For a second, it felt like the world stopped spinning. Laura's face turned pale as if the color had been washed out of her completely. Her boss, Mark, straightened his tie, trying to compose himself, but I could see the panic in his eyes. The silence in that hallway was thick enough to choke on. She tried to speak, but her lips just trembled. "Michael, I can explain," she finally said. I looked at her calmly, not raising my voice, not moving an inch. "Then explain," I said. "You told me you'd be working late. This looks more like you're checking into a room, not checking files." She glanced at Mark, then back at me. We were just going over reports, she said weakly. The office was crowded, so I cut her off. So you decided to find a more comfortable setting? The words came out cold, precise, like a knife slicing through the excuses. Mark opened his mouth, probably ready to pull rank or spin a story, but before he could, the elevator doors opened behind us. A woman stepped out. She was tall, elegant, wearing a long gray coat and holding a handbag. Mark, she said, her voice sharp. You left your phone at the front desk. The three of us froze. Laura turned, and her jaw fell open. I didn't need an introduction. The woman's expression said it all. You must be Mrs. Miller, she said, looking straight at Laura. And I'm Mrs. Davis, Mark's wife. The air was sliced in half. For a moment, nobody moved. Mark's wife took a slow step closer, her gaze turning from confusion to disgust. So this is the project you're managing late at night? She said bitterly. Incredible. I thought I'd seen arrogance before. But this, she looked at Laura from head to toe with an expression that made Laura shrink into herself. Mark tried to stammer something, but I lifted my hand. You know what, Mrs. Davis? I said quietly. I think both our evenings just got clearer. I turned back to Laura. You remember that bracelet I told you about? The one you said you were too busy to see tonight. I opened the box, the gold glinting under the hallway's soft light. This was supposed to remind you of us. Now it's just proof that I was the last person in this marriage to believe in it. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel pity. I felt something sharper, cleaner, a strange calm that comes when the illusion finally breaks. Michael, please, she whispered, reaching toward me. It's not what it looks like. I let out a soft laugh. Laura, for once, it looks exactly like what it is. Mark's wife crossed her arms and stepped beside me, almost as if we shared an unspoken alliance. You know, she said to him, I always wondered why you suddenly cared about staying late at work. Now I know it wasn't ambition, it was desperation. She turned to me. You have my respect, Mr. Miller. At least you caught them before they buried you in lies. I nodded, then looked at Laura. You should take a good look at her, I said. That's what self-respect looks like. Laura tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. I took a step back, tucking the box into my coat pocket. I'm not going to yell or beg, I said. I've already wasted enough breath believing in something that died months ago. Mark reached out as if to block me, his voice rising. There's no need for this scene, he said. Let's be reasonable adults. I looked him straight in the eye and smiled faintly. You've already redefined the word adult, Mark. Maybe you should focus on explaining your version of professionalism to your wife. That made him flinch. His wife glared at him with a fury that could have burned the carpet. You're finished, she said flatly, and you'll be hearing from my lawyer. I turned to leave, and as I walked past Laura, she grabbed my sleeve. Don't do this, she begged. We can fix it. I looked at her hand, then at her tear-streaked face. You broke something that doesn't get fixed, Laura. You turned love into an alibi. She let go slowly, and I walked away without looking back. I heard her sob, but it sounded distant, like a noise coming from another world. When I reached the lobby, the lights seemed too bright, the air too clean. My chest felt hollow, but not heavy. For the first time in months, I wasn't guessing, hoping, or doubting. I knew. That certainty hurt, but it also set something free inside me. I walked out into the cool night, the sound of my footsteps echoing across the pavement. The bracelet box was still in my pocket, but now it felt weightless, meaningless. I drove without direction for a while, the city lights sliding across the windshield like fleeting memories. Eventually, I pulled into a quiet parking lot near the river. The water shimmered under the street lamps, calm and steady, indifferent to everything happening above it. I sat there for a long time, replaying every detail, the way she laughed with him, the way she froze when she saw me, the hollow excuses she tried to build in a matter of seconds. It was like watching the past burn itself down, leaving only the truth behind. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a small motel near downtown, one of those places with flickering signs and humming vending machines. As I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about how many nights I'd spent waiting for her, believing her words without question. It was strange. Betrayal didn't feel like fire. It felt like silence. A silence so deep it swallowed everything. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I made coffee in the small machine by the sink, packed my things, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't see a man broken by betrayal. I saw someone stripped of illusions. There's a difference. One is pain. The other is freedom. By the time I left the motel, I'd already made a decision. I wasn't going to call her, yell, or demand explanations. I was done chasing words that meant nothing. I was going to take back what she'd slowly stolen: my peace, my purpose, my life. And for the first time, I actually smiled. The kind of smile that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone to treat you right and decide to start treating yourself better instead. The following days passed in a blur of quiet determination. I went through the motions: work, errands, the endless silence of a house that no longer felt like a home. Laura called dozens of times, but I ignored most of them. I didn't want to hear apologies shaped like excuses. On the third morning, I finally answered, not out of curiosity, but to end the noise. Her voice was trembling, soft, desperate. "Michael, please, we need to talk. I made a mistake." I didn't speak at first. The sound of her voice brought back flashes of that night in the hotel, the hallway, the lies, the look on her face when I caught her. "You made more than a mistake," I said finally. "You made a choice." She started crying. "It wasn't like that." I was confused. I didn't mean for it to happen. I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. "Confusion doesn't last months, Laura. You've been distant for a long time. Don't insult me by pretending it was an accident." She begged again, telling me she still loved me, that we could go to therapy, rebuild, start fresh. I almost laughed. "You don't rebuild trust, Laura. You earn it every day, and you stopped earning it a long time ago." Before she could respond, I hung up. That click was the sound of a door closing for good. I didn't see her for a week after that. When she finally showed up, it was a Sunday evening. I was sitting in the living room, the bracelet box still on the coffee table. She stood in the doorway, eyes swollen, makeup gone, looking like a stranger who used to know where everything was. "Michael," she whispered, "I can't sleep. I can't think. I don't know what I was doing. Please, let me explain." I didn't stop her, but I didn't offer comfort either. She started pacing, talking fast, words tumbling out. She said she felt unseen, that the routine had swallowed her, that when Mark started paying attention, it filled the emptiness she didn't even realize she had. "I thought it meant something," she said, tears streaking down her face. "But when I saw you in that hallway, I realized what I'd done." I leaned back in my chair and looked at her calmly. "You realized it because you got caught, not because you suddenly found your conscience." She winced. "That's not true," she said, voice cracking. "I've been hating myself every second since that night." I picked up the bracelet box and opened it. The gold glinted under the lamplight. "You know what's strange, Laura?" I said. "I still think this is beautiful, but I can't imagine you wearing it now. It's too honest for you." She knelt in front of me, crying harder, clutching my hands. "Please, Michael, I love you. We've built a life together. Don't throw it away." I looked at her fingers wrapped around mine, then slowly pulled away. "You already threw it away," I said. "You just didn't notice until now." She lowered her head, sobbing silently. For a brief second, I felt the echo of what I used to feel for her, the tenderness, the familiarity, but it was gone as quickly as it came. That night, she left the house for the last time. I didn't watch her go. The next morning, I took the bracelet back to the jewelry store. The same saleswoman recognized me immediately. "Did she like it?" she asked with a bright smile. I hesitated, then said, "She never got the chance to." I asked for a refund. The woman looked confused but didn't ask questions. When she handed me the cash, she said gently, "Sometimes it's better to let go of the gift than to hold on to the memory." I nodded. She was right. With that money, I did something I'd been postponing for years. I registered a business. My own IT consulting firm, small, personal, focused on helping local clinics and small businesses. I used to tell Laura about my dream of starting it one day. She always said it was too risky, that I was better off staying where I was, that stability mattered more than ambition. But now, I had nothing left to lose. I worked day and night, pouring everything I had into making it real. The first month was rough, late nights, long drives, cold dinners, but for the first time in a long while, I felt alive. Every problem solved, every client satisfied, felt like a quiet victory. I wasn't rebuilding what I'd lost. I was building something new. Months passed, and the business grew. One clinic became 3, then 5. I hired 2 part-timers, then an assistant. My days were full again, but this time with purpose. The pain dulled, replaced by focus. I didn't think about Laura much anymore. I didn't need to. The more I built, the more distance there was between who I'd been and who I was becoming. The nights that used to feel endless were now filled with plans, contracts, and the steady hum of progress. Meanwhile, word spread about what had happened. Mark's wife, as it turned out, didn't stay silent. She filed a complaint with their company's ethics board, attaching messages and emails she'd found. The fallout was brutal. Mark was suspended pending investigation, and Laura was quietly transferred to another branch. No promotion, no prestige, just a different desk in a smaller office. I didn't need to interfere. Their actions were undoing themselves. I didn't gloat, didn't celebrate, didn't even smile about it. Karma doesn't need applause. I moved to a smaller house closer to my office. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every tool, every late-night decision felt like a declaration. I'm still here, and I'm standing on my own. People around me began to notice the change. Friends said I looked calmer, sharper. My mother said my eyes looked younger, lighter. Maybe she was right. Maybe when you finally stop carrying the weight of someone else's lies, you start walking taller. One afternoon, about 8 months after the night at the hotel, I saw Laura again. It wasn't planned. I was at a coffee shop downtown, reviewing contracts on my laptop. She walked in, looking thinner, older somehow. Her hair was tied back, her clothes plain. When she saw me, she froze, then forced a small smile. "Hi, Michael," she said softly. "You look good." I closed my laptop and nodded. "Thanks. You too." There was a pause. She seemed to want to say more, maybe ask if I'd forgiven her, maybe try to find a thread to pull, but I didn't give her one. "Take care of yourself," I said, standing up. She looked at me with that same disbelief I'd seen in the hotel hallway, like she still couldn't understand how someone she once underestimated could walk away without looking back. I left her there, surrounded by the noise of clinking cups and murmured conversations. I didn't feel anger, sadness, or triumph, just peace. The kind that comes when the story is truly over. As time moved forward, life settled into something steady, something real. The bitterness that once kept me awake at night had dissolved into quiet clarity. My business was thriving, and for the first time in years, I woke up with purpose instead of anxiety. The house was small but filled with light, and every corner carried the sense of a fresh start. Sometimes, in the early mornings when the sun cut across the blinds, I'd sit with a cup of coffee and think about how far I had come from that night in the hotel hallway. I had stopped asking myself why she did it or what I could have done differently. There are questions that don't have answers, only lessons. I had learned mine. One Saturday morning, while reviewing invoices at my desk, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered anyway. The voice on the other end was hesitant. "Mr. Miller? This is Linda from Northview Medical. We're opening a new office downtown and heard great things about your services." I smiled, that quiet kind of smile that doesn't show on your face but settles deep in your chest. We scheduled a meeting for the next week. What started as a simple call turned into a contract that changed everything. The new clinic became one of my biggest clients, and word spread fast. Within months, my small company had grown beyond what I imagined when I first walked away from that broken marriage. I hired 3 new technicians, bought a used van with my logo printed on the side, and started mentoring younger guys trying to find their footing like I once did. I worked hard, but not out of anger anymore. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about building a life that didn't depend on someone else's honesty. The more success I found, the less I thought about Laura, but fate has a strange way of looping back. About 2 years after our divorce, I attended a business networking event at a local hotel. I walked through the lobby with confidence I hadn't known before. My suit fit well, my handshake was firm, and people came to me instead of the other way around. After a panel discussion, as I was heading toward the exit, I saw her. Laura. She stood near the bar, talking to a colleague. Her hair was shorter now, her posture a little less certain. She caught sight of me before I could turn away. For a moment, her expression froze, the kind of shock that strips the air from a room. Then, with visible effort, she forced a polite smile and walked toward me. "Michael," she said, her voice low but shaky. "It's been a long time." I nodded. "It has." There was a beat of silence. Her eyes scanned me, taking in the tailored suit, the confident stance, the badge with my company's name printed in bold letters. "You started your own business," she said softly. "I heard about it. You're doing really well." I met her gaze and said, "Better than I ever thought I could." She looked down, fidgeting with the rim of her glass. "I'm happy for you," she said, but the words trembled, heavy with everything she didn't say. "I guess you really found your place." I shrugged slightly. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what was holding you back." Her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came out. For a few seconds, we just stood there, surrounded by people talking and laughing, yet somehow alone in our own silence. Then a man walked up to me, one of my new clients, a clinic director. "Michael, there you are," he said warmly, clapping me on the shoulder. "We were just talking about expanding our contract. Everyone's impressed with your work." I smiled and shook his hand. "I appreciate that," I said. As he walked off, I turned back to Laura. Her eyes had widened, not in admiration, but in something closer to realization. I didn't have to say a word. The contrast between who I was when she left and who I had become said everything. She took a slow breath and said quietly, "You really changed." I nodded. "No," I said. "I just stopped letting other people decide my worth." She looked away, blinking fast, and when her gaze returned to mine, there was something like regret, deep, old, and irreversible. "You deserved better," she whispered. I gave a small smile. I finally gave it to myself. I turned to leave. She called after me softly, "Michael, wait." I stopped but didn't turn around. "Yes." There was a pause, and then she said, "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. As I walked out of the hotel, the evening air hit me with a cool rush, and I realized I felt nothing but peace. No anger, no satisfaction, just quiet closure. Some endings don't need fireworks. Sometimes the calm after the storm is victory enough. Over the next few years, the business continued to grow. I opened a small office downtown, hired a full team, and started mentoring young entrepreneurs who reminded me of myself. People began inviting me to speak at small business panels about resilience, rebuilding, and self-worth. It wasn't fame or wealth that fulfilled me. It was knowing that I'd built something from the ashes without bitterness. One evening, as I was locking up the office, my assistant handed me an envelope. "This came for you today," she said. Inside was a wedding invitation. Mark Davis and Laura Thompson. I stared at it for a few seconds, not feeling anger or sadness, just disbelief. It wasn't my business, not anymore. I placed the envelope in the drawer and never opened it again. Whatever she sought in that new life wasn't my concern. My chapter with her was long over. Years later, I still sometimes think about that night, the bracelet, the hallway, the shock on her face. Not because it hurts, but because it reminds me how far I've come. Pain can be the sharpest teacher, betrayal, the cruelest motivator. But once you step out of the wreckage, you realize something powerful. No one can truly destroy you unless you let them. I learned that rebuilding doesn't mean restoring what was lost. It means creating something better in its place. And that's why, when people ask how I moved on, I tell them this. You don't fight fire with fire. You let it burn what was never meant to last, and then you start again, stronger. So if you've ever been betrayed, lied to, or left behind, remember, sometimes what feels like the end is just the beginning you didn't know you needed. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Because sometimes, the stories that hurt the most are the ones that remind us how strong we really are.